Let's just have a look at the very first paragraph of Kant's text and see what we can make of it. This is on page 9. So Kant writes, I'll just read out the highlights. There's nothing it's possible to think of anywhere in the world that can be held to be good without limitation, excepting only a good will. Okay, so he's saying the goodwill is the only unconditional good that exists in the world, the only unconditionally valuable thing. Now, I actually wrote down a list of all of these things that Kant calls limited goods. So my list, I'm not certain that it's complete, but my list came up with 14 things that he lists as limited goods: courage, resoluteness, understanding, wit, judgment, persistence, power, wealth, honor, health, happiness, moderation, self-control, and sober reflection. Very long list. And we could, I'm sure, add to it, and Kant will, in the course of his text, add to it somewhat. We have to ask the question, why does Kant think of these goods as limited goods? And the answer is that any one of these supposedly good qualities, any one of these 14 supposedly good qualities, can actually be a negative quality if it happens to be accompanied by a bad will, by someone with bad intentions. So we don't want someone who is intent on harming someone else to be a courageous person. We wish they'd be a cowardly person, right? That would be a good thing if they were cowardly. That would actually improve their character, because they would be less bad than they otherwise would. So the reverse of that is these limited goods are only good if they're accompanied by a good will, if they're accompanied by right intention. And don't worry, I'm going to make this point in a couple of different ways. But the conclusion of Kant's argument here is right at the beginning, that the goodwill is the only unlimited good, right? It's the only thing that is good without qualification, without limits. There's another way of talking about this, and that is in terms of conditions. And both of these explanations, by the way, are equivalent, so you can take the one that makes the most sense to you. Kant calls that giant list of limited goods conditional goods, and that word conditional is going to be important throughout his book. What he means is that each one of the things on the list is good on the condition that the person who has it also has the goodwill. If that condition is not met, that personality characteristic is either neutral or completely unethical, or even evil, if that's a concept for you. Evil is really a theological term. So then Kant asks, what is this relationship between the goodwill and the limited goods a symmetrical relationship? What it would mean for it to be a symmetrical relationship is that the goodwill is itself only good if it's accompanied by one of the conditional goods. And the answer has to be for Kant, no. This is not a symmetrical relationship. It's an asymmetrical relationship, because someone can be a good person without necessarily having any of the limited goods, right? Someone can be a good person without being happy, without being healthy, without being wealthy, without being powerful, even maybe without being courageous necessarily, right? So the goodwill does not depend on any of the limited goods in order to be good, whereas the limited goods do depend upon the goodwill in order to be good. Again, an asymmetrical relationship. I want you to notice that Kant has given a very clear argument here, very clear evidence for his claim that the goodwill is the only unlimited and unconditional good. His strategy is to ask, well, what else could be an unconditional good? And he goes through the list of possibilities and discovers that none of those supposedly good qualities is actually good unless the goodwill goes with it. So that's how he's giving reasons for his claim here. Just to remind you, Mill's primary form of argumentation, his way of giving evidence for his claims, is the objection and reply format. And you'll notice that Kant's way of arguing for his position is different from Mill's, but both ways of giving evidence or support for a claim are legitimate ones. I'm bringing this out for two reasons. We don't just want to know what each philosopher thinks about ethics, but also why she thinks it, and whether we should think that too. And the best way of doing that is to look at the reasons the author gives in support of their views, and to ask whether those reasons are compelling enough reasons for us to adopt their positions too. Second reason I'm emphasizing this, as I've mentioned before, I'm eventually going to ask what might count for you personally as a highest moral principle. And I don't just want you to state your position clearly. I also want you to give some reasons for your position that might be convincing to someone else. And you can't just say, well, I think Aristotle is right. You're going to have to take into account a weakness or limitation of at least one of the philosophers we've studied and write about how you would fix it.